the information related to this year's Foundation Celebration, which is the 37th annual Foundation Celebration. It's going to be at the Skirball Cultural Center on Saturday, November 6th, 5 to 10 p.m. It's going to, the name of the ball, the Foundation Celebration this year is Ball, Gowns, and Bow Ties. There will be silent auction, live auction, opportunity drawings, and all benefiting our Rotary Foundation. So there are ways to support is to attend. There'll be tables again. I'll talk with, I guess with you, Tom, in terms of how many tables we want, who might be interested in going. The cost this year is $175 per person. And but if you purchase your tickets by September 30th, the price is $150. So they do require everyone who does purchase dinner tickets to provide either to send them a copy or an image of your COVID vaccine card or a negative result, a PCR test within 72 hours of the event. They're asking for donations again, at least a minimum of $300 donations. If you're interested, let me know or contact Carmela Rack. You can get her email address off the website for the district, or it's carmrack, CARMRAACK at AOL.com. But anyway, Carmela's handling this year's live auction or items for the auctions. The opportunity tickets, they've been, frankly, in my view, they've been slow in getting them out. They're supposed to get out this week. A flash email to everybody. It's pretty much the same system that they followed last year. I kind of inserted myself in the process to help expedite it. I'll do that again this year. As soon as I get it and we all get it, I'll kind of refresh everyone's memories as how it was done. But essentially, there is a place you can purchase the tickets online using your credit card or send me a check. Also, you'll send me an image of a PDF image of your raffle tickets that you purchased. Each book is 12 tickets. And there's a means to fill it out online through a PDF. Then you email that PDF to me. I fill out the multiple donor form and submit it to the district along with all those tickets that everyone sends me. We did really well last year. We did over $5,000, if my recollection's correct, or maybe even over $6,000. I don't remember exactly the balance, but we did really well last year, and I hope we do well again this year. Our window has been narrowed in terms of when they first sent out that email last year. This year, here we are on September 16th, and we haven't had it sent to us yet, but we'll get it done. We will.
And
yes.
I'm sorry. It's
Sure.
September.
Go ahead, Marcia. Pardon me?
September 25th, like in 9 days.
Oh, no. This is a different, what you're seeing here. No, this is something different. I'm talking about the foundation celebration on November 6th. What you're looking at here on the 25th, which they've had a series. Well, let me finish up on the November 6th, and then I'll address what's on the screen here. So that's pretty much on November 6th. Expect an email from the district as well as from me regarding the purchase of raffle tickets. Also, if anybody has made a decision right now about purchasing dinner tickets, let me know. I know who all went 2 years ago. That'll be my starting point in terms of eliciting interest in buying tickets for the dinner. But at that point, we'll go ahead and purchase the table. I don't want to make a commitment just yet with the world we're in now. I just don't know what kind of interest our club has in a live dinner at the Skirball. But that's what I like each one of you to think about and let me know over the next few days, and then we'll take it from there. Marcia and others, what you're looking at on the screen on the 25th, this is a seminar series that the district's been putting on. I participated in the first couple, and this is just in the morning of Saturday, the 25th. It's a Zoom, and it's just informational on this particular one. I think it's on grants, on the process of applying for grants. It's interesting. If anybody is interested in going on and viewing it for that hour, please, maybe the International Service Chair might be interested in doing that. But it has nothing to do with the foundation celebration, other than they'll probably bring up the fact that it's going to occur on November 6th. So anyway, that's it for now on the foundation celebration on November 6th. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I'll be
chance
sending out
we're
an
gonna-
email shortly. Pardon me?
Is there a chance we're going to put an end to that record we have of never winning and found the prizes on?
Well, I hope so. I have my fingers crossed, Tom. Eventually, somebody's going to be a big winner. I think last year though, didn't Bill Rowan win? I think Bill won something last year or 2 years ago.
I did.
That's what I thought. Bill, well done.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll be a repeat
Oh.
performer.
Maybe.
Good job, guys. But anyway, thank you in advance for your commitment to purchase raffle tickets. Be prepared to either go online and charge those tickets for $100 or just mail me a check. But I'll have something out to you in the next few days to get that process underway.
Okay.
And thanks
thank you,
again.
Steve. All looking
You're
forward to that.
Yeah, it should be fun. I hope we're all able to attend.
Next up is fines for the day. I'm not so sure what the fines are because the birthdays. Happy birthday to Carol, Nina, Brian, Ava, Benjamin Fisher, a new member, Kathy Gall, and Ziba. So anyway, but one thing we will assess a fine for is Stephen Marsh Day's 34 years anniversary. And $34 is appropriate, I think, for fine this special anniversary.
Marcia, come here.
The Rotary anniversaries, Diane, Adele, Ava, and Joy Bennett Wolf, 9 years. So
Tom,
anniversary
Marcia wants to
birthday.
say no, Tom. Marcia,
Yes.
Marcia's right here, and I don't think she heard quite what you said.
Oh, we said congratulations on married for 34 years, Marcia.
We haven't made it
And your
quite.
husband is
there yet.
obligated.
We're only 33 years and 363 days.
September 19th, that's right.
Yeah. Can I interject here, Tom? It's September 19th. Our wedding invitation in there.
Oh, 19th.
19th. Yeah. We were not. So I'm not sure we're really actually married. I'm kind
Is
of
that a-
banking on it. That was a misspelling on our
Misspelling.
invitation. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway, thank you. We're very happy and joyed that we can make a $34 contribution.
Okay, congratulations. again.
Thank you.
We have a feature of the day today, just to kill a few moments here. It's the America you didn't know about. Now here we've got is New York's population is greater than 40 states combined population. Which 40, I'm not sure. And I'm not going to vouch for the accuracy of all these slides, but I think they're probably fairly reliable. But anyway, New York, a big city. I'm glad I'm not living there. Pennsylvania, you realize it's misspelled on the Liberty Bell? You have a misspelling of Pennsylvania, one of the original colonies. Lake Superior. The water in Lake Superior covers North and South America combined. If you have 1 foot level of water, it would combine both North and South America. That is that low. And here we are in a drought in Southern California.
Deep.
Russia sold Alaska to the United States for 2 cents per share in 1872.
Breaker. What a
Bargain.
bargain.
Yeah, I'll say.
What a bargain.
And they really got after him for that. They thought it was a bad deal.
That's a good deal.
Weird folly.
If you stayed one night in Las Vegas hotel room, for each hotel room in Las Vegas, you would have to take you 400 years of spending night. There's your Las Vegas. Quite a spot. We were talking about that in our chit chat, and nobody goes there anymore, except there must be a lot of people
Yeah, they
who
do.
visit, no question. And the concrete at Hoover Dam, if you had a 2-lane highway, you could build it from that concrete from San Francisco to New York City. That much concrete, which I don't think it's going anywhere. And Bradford is in Kansas City. Well, he's not this week, but normally in wheat, Kansas would feed the world for 2 weeks. So that's, and Idaho's rivers stretch across America. Rivers stretch for 40 times the length of the United States. That many rivers. Of course, that's a long north-south type of state, and I'm sure they're run extensive. So, And a very egotistical amendment was created in the, I think it was 18 something or other, late 18. It was brought before the Congress to call the America Mother Earth, the United States of Mother Earth. I don't know who would propose that, but now onto more important information. I present to you John O'Keefe to introduce our speaker for the day. John?
Yes, much more important. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be introducing Professor Stephen J. Duffy. Here's a little
Dickey.
anecdote about his name. I first discovered or found out about Professor Dickey, when I took a class in the Senior Scholar program at UCLA. And it was a class that was entitled English 90. And then it said Dickey, S.J. next to it, standing for Stephen J. And I, being a Jesuit trained fellow, thought to myself, oh boy, he must be a Jesuit. S.J. is the Society of Jesus, of course. Tom Byrne would know that, having gone to a Jesuit school. But no, it's Stephen J. Duffy. Stephen J. Dickey, I keep saying Duffy, I'm sorry. Professor Dickey went to Bowdoin College. Does anyone know where Bowdoin College is?
Uruguay.
Where?
Maine.
No, you can't. No, you can't
Maine.
answer, Professor. Where is it?
Maine.
Maine.
Maine is correct. Very good. And then he has a PhD from Harvard University. He's a senior lecturer in the UCLA English Department, and he's received numerous teaching prizes, including the Distinguished Teaching Award in 1993. He teaches various courses in Shakespeare, the English Renaissance, and the Beat Generation. Maybe we can have you talk about that sometime, Professor, at Rotary, as well as introductory courses in poetry and drama. And having taken this course myself in the Senior Scholar program, along with about 50 or 60 freshman kids at UCLA, I could see why he won those awards, because he's a truly great teacher. In any case, the title for his talk today is Shakespearean Empathy, Between the Lines and Behind the Scenes. That's a very stimulating topic. And let's hear from Professor Stephen J. Dickey. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, John. I'm going to have a PowerPoint with this, inevitably, I guess. And if you can let me share my screen or give me host power or something. Guest host. A co-host. Thank you. So I will get to that in a minute.
Okay. Mhm.
Great. Let me call that up now. This other stuff. Here we go. All right. I will come to that in a moment. Is that visible to you? Do you see a page from the first folio?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Very good. And I can even make that, I'll make that bigger in a minute. I just want to get to the topic and explain what I'm going to try to do today. Some weeks ago, my friend John O'Keefe asked me to consider the topic of empathy and possible connections between that trait or skill or gift, not sure, it may be all of those things, and William Shakespeare. The germ of the idea came from a recent book called Of Human Kindness, What Shakespeare Teaches Us About Empathy. The book argued that as his career progressed, Shakespeare himself acquired greater empathy for different kinds of people and therefore became able to elicit empathy in those attentive to what he wrote. Shakespeare aside, versions of this general idea have always served in some form as the definition and or justification of literature and the arts generally. Such fields are grouped within the humanities as if to say that something of what makes us fully human can be found in the arts, either through their practice by the individual artist or through the apprehension of the work by the viewer, audience, listener, reader, whatever form of art you're talking about. The idea is ancient and is well expressed by the first century Roman Aulus Gellius, who stresses that the term humanitas does not mean that you're a nice person, but refers specifically to education and training in the noble arts. These are the arts through which, when we learn them, we become most humanized. It's a translation of the Latin of Aulus Gellius. But what does humanized mean? Does this lead to empathy? I'm going to confess to some skepticism about this notion. The late and great critic George Steiner spent much time puzzling over, quote, how it was possible for Hitler's SS to carry copies of Goethe's poems in their back pockets as they went about their dark official business. How could such men come home from their day's butchery and falsehood to weep over Rilke and play Bach and Schubert in the evening? And then Steiner brings it even closer to home. We do not know, and surely there is something rather terrible in our doubt, whether the study and delight a man takes in Shakespeare makes him any less capable of organizing a concentration camp. Steiner brooded on this throughout his career. Steiner did not, and nor would I, completely discard the notion that the arts can humanize artist and audience alike. The root of the word humane is human, and the root of kindness is kind. And while we use that term now mostly to describe small favors or a generally benevolent disposition, or again, something rather trivial like that, in Shakespeare's era, the word had the much deeper resonance of kind meaning type or category. We still have that meaning for it, of course. Or again, to use a related term, kin and kind. In this case, therefore, whatever is typical of or natural to humanity. And thus the terms kind and humane begin to work together to suggest the fellow feeling, the kinship at the root of empathy, quote, the power of entering into the experience or emotions of others. That is dependent upon a felt kinship of you with everyone else. Indeed, everyone else who has ever lived, I suppose, because we are still watching and performing these plays 400 years after they were written. The medium of Shakespeare's empathy, as I see it, is his extraordinary language. I don't mean this just in terms of the way he can give so many different characters their own particular voices, suggesting his deep and intuitive comprehension of the varieties of human personalities. Rather, I mean this in terms of the way his plays encourage us to ponder those varieties, or even demand, his plays demand that we, whether we're reading them or sitting in the theater, that we actively feel the tensions, the contradictions, and the complexities in his characters by absorbing their language, speech by speech, and word by word. While we may not end up sympathizing with those characters, Macbeth, Goneril, how about Iago? Anyone feeling sorry for Iago? Not sure you get any takers on that. Shakespeare's verbal skills and psychological cunning nonetheless place us in a position to empathize with those characters, even or maybe especially when we don't sympathize with them. We can still feel what they are feeling or verbalize. Today, I just wanted to put a single example of Shakespeare's text under the microscope with all of you, and to sort of get, some of this is pedagogical, some of this are different approaches one might take in the classroom or at home reading, but to just try to get some sense of the different tools we have to show what can happen when we immerse ourselves in its language, when we read between the lines toward the character being presented to us, and then toward the end of the talk, I want to go, as the other half of my title suggests, behind the scenes, to examine one of the ways Shakespeare uses received material, source material, and gets it to be involved in his play world and in the minds of his characters, and thereby transmitted to us so that we also have a common link to them. Part of the idea of empathy here. So the first, I'm going to turn this into the slideshow mode now. The first thing, let me shrink that, okay. You are looking at is the beginning of the play Antony and Cleopatra. And this is right out of the first folio of 1623. It's our only source for this play. Without the book, the first folio, we have only about half of Shakespeare's surviving plays. No Macbeth, no Measure for Measure, no Winter's Tale, no Antony and Cleopatra, and others. But thankfully, we have the first folio. And if you want to see one in the flesh, so to speak, the Huntington Library has a copy of it. And of course, the famous Folger Library back in Washington, D.C. has a huge collection of the folios. I'm going to give it a close-up now. That's what the whole sheet looks like at the beginning of the play. I'm going to, I thought I would do that. I'll go this way. This is the first speech in the play. This is the close-up. The text, as you'll see, is quite clean, and modern editions, if you had one lying around, if you consulted it, would be hardly different. Maybe a little changes of spelling here and there. I'm going to read this, and I think by the end of today, maybe at the end of this talk, we'll all have the speech pretty well memorized. This is how the play starts. Enter Demetrius and Philo. Philo. Nay, but this dotage of our generals o'erflows the measure. Those his goodly eyes that o'er the files and musters of the war have glowed like plated Mars, now bend, now turn, the office and devotion of their view upon a tawny front. His captain's heart, which in the scuffles of great fights hath burst the buckles on his breast, reneges all temper, and is become the bellows and the fan to cool a gypsy's lust. Stage direction. Flourish. Enter Antony, Cleopatra, her ladies, the train, with eunuchs fanning her. Look where they come. Take but good note, and you shall see in him the triple pillar of the world, transformed into a strumpet's fool. Behold and see. In its structure, this speech can be seen as a series of 3 before and after comparisons by the speaker, Philo, of the character of Antony. I've arranged it on this slide as a kind of formal, kind of outline format so we can get a sense of the structure. The first line is the basic assertion of the speech, an assertion made, we should note, in apparent rebuttal to something spoken by Demetrius, perhaps in support of Antony. The play, in other words, begins in the middle of a conversation, and we immediately sense that Philo has been challenged to support his opinion. There's a certain vehemence then in that first word, nay. He's refuting whatever was said just before the play began. Nay, but this dotage, meaning more in those days folly, Antony's folly in doting on Cleopatra rather than the modern sense of senility or incompetence and that sort. Nay, but this dotage of our generals, implying that both Philo and Demetrius are in Antony's camp, o'erflows the measure, meaning that Philo finds Antony's behavior to be excessive, even if perhaps Demetrius doesn't. Part 1 of the outline is Exhibit A. Exhibit A are the eyes of Antony, which used to glow, according to Philo, when supervising his army, but are now looking elsewhere. Those his goodly eyes that o'er the files and musters of the war have glowed like plated Mars, now bend, now turn, the office and devotion of their view upon a tawny front. Part 2, Exhibit B, is Antony's heart, which, according to Philo, used to pound so hard in battle that it knocked his armor loose, but now it beats to a different rhythm, or rather it doesn't really beat at all, since Philo switches to an image more suggestive of the lungs than of the heart. His captain's heart, which in the scuffles of great fights hath burst the buckles on his breast, reneges all temper, and is become the bellows and the fan to cool a gypsy's lust. At this point, the speech is interrupted by a stage direction, and a vivid and unusually detailed one at that. Flourish, enter Antony, Cleopatra, her ladies, the train, with eunuchs fanning her. Philo's next 3 statements punctuate the often comical staging of this moment before, during, and or after the procession. This is what Philo says. Look where they come. Take but good note, and you shall see, etc. Perhaps he is so insistent that Demetrius look at Antony because the spectacle of this entrance supports Philo's claims. This is his proof. This is his argument. And then he recaps that argument with part 3. Exhibit C is Antony himself. We've looked at his eyes. We've talked about his heart. Now, in him, the triple pillar of the world transformed into a strumpet's fool. He had been one of the triumvirate, right? One of the 3 men holding up the world, or the world of the Roman Empire. And now he is merely a strumpet's fool. And in the unlikely event Demetrius's mind was wandering, Philo tells him 2 more times to look. This brings to 5 the number of times Philo demands his attention. Look where they come, take but good note, and you shall see, behold and see. And that's the end of the first speech. These commands are not, of course, just explicitly to Demetrius, but also implicitly to the audience. And they engage our visual attention even as we take in Philo's often quite complex and difficult language. His basic message about Antony is clear enough, especially as it is underscored by that spectacular entrance. Antony has been transformed from a great Roman warrior into just another member of Cleopatra's entourage. Indeed, he's right down there with the eunuchs now, fanning her, as if he has been emasculated as a eunuch. But the main thing that gets communicated here, and I think that draws us in and where one can begin to think about empathetic connections, is Philo's emotional state, rendered in lines that allow a fair bit of latitude to actors to play with. They can play with it in many different tones along a spectrum from blasé to appalled, intermediate stops at irritation, upset, incredulity, sorrow. Think of all the possible ways of playing this text. This is the blueprint. The performance will go in other directions based on it. Philo appears, whatever we say, to feel very strongly about this change in Antony, and he clearly places some or most of the blame on Cleopatra. I am going to, for purposes of time, skip the next 2 slides, so bear with me. This had to do with vocal exercises, really, vocal stylings, warm-up exercises to show how the sound effects of the speech work. But I'm going to return now to what one of my colleagues once referred to as typographical goofing around, although he didn't exactly use the word goofing, but this is a way I find useful of seeing patterns, symmetries, asymmetries in the text. This is from, again, the same speech we just looked at, the 2 parts of it. The bolded words are synonymous or at least conceptually related to each other. On the one hand, eyes, on the other, heart. Second line, war, fights, plated, buckles. Now bend, now turn, reneges all temper. Those are all connected to each other, related or associated in some way. The italicized terms are less to do with the actual meanings of the words and more with perhaps the sound or the structure of the syntax. That or the files, which in the scuffles have glowed, hath burst. The office and devotion, the bellows and the fan, two compound terms. Tawny front, gypsy's lust, two phrases that pejoratively refer to Cleopatra, Philo's dislike of her. You see how balanced those are. I think we can see on this as well as here, that the speech is both highly disciplined in its organization and yet wildly hyperbolic, repetitive, and over the top in its rhetoric. The image of Antony getting so worked up in battle, not even in a great fight, but just a scuffle in a great fight. The image of the armor bursting off of his chest sounds like something in a comic book or a special effect in a movie. And did I mention that his eyes are glowing the whole time? It's a very elaborately sort of cartoonish image, exaggeration. In the next slide, here are some more patterns that I'm trying to foreground by changing colors and making them stand out and linking them in different ways. You see, for example, in the first line, the phrase dotage of our generals. That is a formula, a possessive formula that you find working its way through the speech down to the other blue phrase, captain's heart, gypsy's lust, strumpet's fool. Just thinking about that sequence. What happens to Antony when you move him from general to captain? He's demoted in the first half of the speech, which is part of Philo's argument. Cleopatra, who is in fact a queen, is nonetheless derogated as gypsy or strumpet in the later phrases. Dotage, heart, lust, fool. There isn't exactly love being discussed here, but foolishness and lust. Other patterns, the bracketed phrases at the top, or flows the measure, or the files and musters. There's something obviously sort of playing off each other in the sound there. The number of underlined phrases that are in some sense redundant in their formulation. Files and musters, now bend, now turn. Those are different things, but they are repetitious of each other. The office and devotion, the bellows and the fan. Why is it Philo seems to say everything twice, or at least twice, as in these underlined phrases, and then all the beholds and looks and sees and take but good note, emphatic to a fault. These are features of the speech that even as we take them in, whether we're reading them or sitting in a theater, begin to fill out our portrait of Philo, our sense of what he's feeling, and maybe analogies to what we are feeling about Philo's feeling in that sense. Now, at some point in all of this discussion and these patterns, it may have occurred to you that Philo seems unusually interested in armor and metal. And in this next slide, I have highlighted two sets of terms that either directly or by association can refer to metal in various forms, to its properties and colors, and to the occupation of blacksmith. You can see them on there. Measure, files, and bellows and fan are tools of the trade. Plated and buckles refer to armor, as does scuff, concealed here within the word scuffles. A scuff in this case is an obsolete term for a metallic plate that has been fashioned as an ornamental cover for something else, most commonly the point of a scabbard or a sheath or a sword when not in use. And speaking of hidden words, I can in this context hear a muted word trumpet peeking out, another metal object, obviously, peeking out from the word strumpet in the last line. In this context, or flows, glowed, and tawny evoke certain aspects or byproducts of metalwork, and when joined to the bellows and the fan, point us to the crucial term temper. for working in steel, tempering steel, hardening it, and yet preserving a kind of flexibility there. To temper metal is in some sense to do all of the things Antony is doing. It's to glow and bend and turn into something else. And so given Philo's interest in Antony's armor, which is explicit in the speech, the phrase reneges all temper is both a turning point and a melting point in the speech. It's the point at which the steely Roman warrior alters, softens, bends, and turns into a lover, which of course Philo is not in favor of. John, I wanted to ask, I'm going to have to make some decisions about cutting some things. How much time do I have at this point?
About another 15 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. I will keep going then.
Leave some time for questions, would you, Stephen?
Sure. Okay. I'll try to keep it to 10 then, and maybe that'll be, or 7.5, something like that. This is one more fancy diagram, and then I want to move on to a little bit of art history with you, and indirectly back to this talk. I have isolated the tension in Philo's attitudes. It's pretty clear what his explicit preference was. It was for the Antony who came before, the Antony who expresses or who embodies Roman sentiments of glory and war, political power, masculine self-discipline. In contrast to that, Philo is explicitly, well, not in contrast to it, as part of that attitude, Philo is explicitly misogynistic in referring to Cleopatra as a strumpet, not to mention, by Roman standards, racially pejorative in calling attention to the tawny skin of the gypsy queen, gypsy being related to the word Egypt. But in every other way, my point is that the content of the speech is Roman and polemically so. But the speech itself, the structure, the decorum, the rhetoric of it is, there's no other way to say it, Egyptian. Philo talks like an Egyptian. His speech breaks through the boundaries of syntax and poetic decorum. It is, as we have noted, cartoonishly extreme with the glowing eyes and bursting armor. And like some sort of poetic river Nile, it literally overflows the measure or meter of the iambic lines. And this slide charts the way Shakespeare uses the poetic technique known as enjambment, meaning continuing to the next line to finish the meaning of what you're reading, rather than coming to an end stop. So in this speech, you can see by these diagrams that only 2 of the 13 lines of the speech have a conventional end stop. Those are Roman lines. Those are lines that set out, march across, and stop. By Roman, I mean, of course, the value system that the play sort of presents as Roman. Whereas the fluid, the overflowing of the boundaries, the malleability, the reneging of all temper so that it's sort of loose and spontaneous, those are characteristics given to the Egyptian part of this dichotomy. In every other instance, other than those 2 lines, the poetic lines force us onward, ever onward, to complete the thought or the grammatical unit. And sometimes when we think we have finished the unit of meaning, it turns out we haven't, and the syntax keeps propelling us forward. For example, the enjambment at the end of line 4 is different and more surprising than that of the first 3 lines. Nay, but this dotage of our generals leaves us knowing that something has to come next to finish off that, or flows the measure. Those his goodly eyes, we know there's something missing, it's gonna come. That o'er the files and musters of the war, we know something's still missing, have glowed like plated Mars, now bend, now turn. The sentence could end there, couldn't it, and be grammatically correct, but it doesn't. Now bend, now turn, the office and devotion of their view, and then it keeps going still further, upon a tawny front. This is a very much more fluid kind of the syntax and use of the poetic unit. So here's a speech that is, as I said, in the content Roman, in style Egyptian. It features the extravagant redundancy of an agitated speaker. Philo, as we know, says a lot of things twice or even more. Files and musters both refer to ranks of soldiers. Now bend, now turn are different versions of a similar concept. Office and devotion. That's a good example, I think, of what I'm calling a Roman vocabulary, which are in red, concerned with Roman affairs, and an Egyptian way of speaking, more to do with emotion and the inner life, not world conquest. And then, of course, the play is working toward this dialectical form over and over again in so many ways. I've ended up just putting up some words, made them purple to suggest they are a blending, they are a mingle, a heavenly mingle, as Cleopatra says in the play, of both the Roman and the Egyptian worlds. As the word front, which could mean a battle line, or in this case, Cleopatra's face or forehead. It's a word that participates in both vocabularies. Now, the other thing that I think is happening here, and I'll try to be very quick about this, is that, and this is behind the scenes, not between the lines, is that Shakespeare is summoning or beginning to summon in this speech through the mouth of Philo, a famous, perhaps more famous to his audience than yet to us, but I think we know it, or we can fill in the details, myth, the myth of the god Vulcan, who is married to the goddess Venus. This is the Roman pantheon. And Venus has an affair with the god Mars. And I will, let's see, very quickly show you, this is usually viewed as Shakespeare's favorite book. Ovid is Shakespeare's favorite. If you ask Shakespeare, who's your favorite poet? He would have said Ovid. And Ovid's Metamorphoses is the famous compendium of ancient myth. And it was translated early in Shakespeare's lifetime by a man named Arthur Golding. And I'll just give you a little taste of it because it's kind of charming. Old-fashioned verse makes Shakespeare sound modern, in fact. Phoebus, the sun, notices that Mars is sneaking off with Venus, and he tells Vulcan, the husband. I'll start down near the end of this page. He showed her husband, Vulcan, Juno's son, the advutry, old-fashioned word for adultery, and the place in which this privy scape was done. And Vulcan then was in such a case that heart and hand and all did fail in working for a space. He couldn't do anything. Anon, he featly forged a net of wire, so fine and slight that neither knot nor noose therein apparent was to sight. This piece of work was much more fine than any handwarp oof, or that whereby the spider hangs in sliding from the roof. That's such an interestingly quaint image. So Vulcan, using his skills as a metal worker, makes a net of mesh, metal mesh, that is invisible, more delicate than that of a spider web. And he catches them in flagrante in this net and displays them for all the gods to see as his revenge on Venus. Very end of the passage on this slide, and setting ope the ivory doors, Vulcan called all the gods straightway to see them. They, well, Venus and Mars, with shame enough fast locked together lay. A certain god among the rest, disposed for to sport, did wish that he himself also were shamed in that sort. The residue laughed, and so in heaven there was no talk a while, but of this pageant, how the smith, the lovers did beguile. This was a theme taken up by many artists at the time. The wonderful Botticelli, Venus and Mars, shows Venus here looking very enigmatic and demure. What happens to Mars once he sleeps with Venus? That's what happens. He can't even be waked up by the satyr babies there. This is the whole canvas. I'm sure you've seen it. And closer to home, we have this in the Getty. This is Vaudeville. And this was in about the years Shakespeare was actually writing Antony and Cleopatra. You see the lovers caught in bed, all the gods are gathered around laughing, and in the middle of the painting, there's a scene that we are allowed to look at behind, which is being displayed, and it is in the background Vulcan going back to work at his forge, pounding out some new bit of armor or what have you. Mars and Venus surprised by Vulcan. So the plot thickens in this case. There are three characters in the myth, Venus, Mars, and Vulcan, and Philo's speech seems to hint that they will be proved to be archetypes for the major figures of the play that follow. Cleopatra can be, in an obvious way, associated with Venus, the goddess of love. Mars is explicitly likened to Antony, or at least Antony before he met Cleopatra. Perhaps Mars is later better embodied by Octavius Caesar. The plot thickens, though. Who is the Vulcan of the play? In a sense, it is Antony, as he becomes what Cleopatra calls husband. In another sense, it is Cleopatra who gathers Antony up in the mesh of her grace, as Octavius says, her strong toil or net. And I think I think the Vulcan-like features can also be found in Philo himself. He's the jilted Roman. He's speaking passionately of Antony and calling everyone to look, behold, see, just as Vulcan displayed the plain proof of his betrayal to an audience of Olympian gods. And I would say surely there's another analog to Vulcan we could mention here. That would be the skilled manual laborer, the artisan who shapes raw materials into something useful or beautiful or both. I refer, of course, to the playwright himself, the smith or maker who wrought this mesh of language out of the raw materials of history and myth, and whose powers of empathy and combination with our own brought into being, however briefly, the figure of Philo. That descendant of Vulcan would be Shakespeare, the author of the speech demanding that we look at another spectacle of Mars and Venus. And I would end just by pointing you to this slide. And what I can do is simply send this to John, and he could forward it out to all of you if you want to spend more time with the PowerPoint. But these are how some modern poets have reacted, particularly to this play. The Dickinson passage is just wonderful, I think. She's finally allowed to read again, and she races home to Amherst. She had been in Boston with her eye doctor, and she's back in Amherst, and she races to her library. How my blood bounded. Shakespeare was the first. Antony and Cleopatra, where Enobarbus laments the amorous lapse of his master. She got the character a little bit wrong. Enobarbus is later in the play. Here is the ring of it. And then she quotes the speech we've been talking about. Then I thought, why touch? Crosses that out. Clasp any hand but this. I'm struck by the way she uses words like ring of it, crosses out touch and goes for clasp, as if the language of metal in the speech has somehow begun to enter her. And then the other two, I know I don't have time to go through these, but these are interesting testimonials to the power of Shakespeare's language as it has engaged the empathies of later poets. And I think I'll better stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. That's very interesting. I have a question though.
Sure.
I was when I was first introduced to Shakespeare, I think in high school or something like that,
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what was going on. Don't you almost need a Shakespearean dictionary of meanings and pronunciations to really understand Shakespeare?
Well, it helps, but my preferred remedy is to, and it's been difficult these past few years, as most things have, to go see the plays, to go see them acted.
Yeah.
Actors are better than dictionaries, or they can be.
Don't they use the same language as Shakespeare wrote it?
Yeah. There are plenty of companies that will do the original text. Then there are companies that will. Well, you would be very unlikely to see an entire script unedited performed, but you would be able to see at A Noise Within out here where I live in Pasadena, or in other Shakespeare if the UCLA Shakespeare Society could get up and going. They don't fool around with the text. They present it as written. And a good actor is worth 100 footnotes. A good actor can get the meaning or the sense of something across, I find. And the other thing that seeing it and hearing it live does is you become alert to puns that the eye can't pick up. You can't read a pun, but you can hear a pun. And seeing the performances will open that dimension up, I think, quite helpfully. It does help to have a dictionary of Shakespeare, a glossary, or the OED, Oxford English Dictionary handy, but you need that less than you think you do.
I think Steve Shear had a question for you. Steve?
Sure. Yes.
Professor, that was just wonderful. In a short period of time, you helped us appreciate the depth and complexity of Shakespeare. And it took me back to the University of Illinois when I was studying Shakespeare in the late 1960s. And I remember my professor, Alan Holliday, who was the chair of the English department there.
Very good.
And at the time, there was a lot of controversy over who was William Shakespeare,
Right.
because of the depth and the complexity, and you get into other parts of Shakespeare and understanding of history and royalty and all of this. Who was William Shakespeare?
Well, I think he was William Shakespeare. I think he was the man from Stratford, because behind this question is also, was he actually university educated? Was he actually of the nobility? Was he actually a committee? I mean, if I'm going to be nudged off the claim that Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare, it would be in the direction of a kind of implicit collaboration with perhaps other writers. We know he began his career, and this was fairly typical, that scripts, the dramatic script in the Elizabethan Jacobean era was the property of the acting company. They would commission it from the writers. And they would often farm out bits of it to different writers. So many, many plays of this era were collaborative. I don't think it's like my image of, the sitcoms, people sitting around a room and all trading ideas and jokes and writing it that way. I think the labor was a little more isolated, but many of these plays had multiple authors. Shakespeare was fairly unique in that once he became well known, his name singly would start to appear on title pages. We have plenty of evidence linking the upwardly mobile burgher of Stratford who wants his coat of arms straightened out to the same person who is the actor, playwright, and shareholder in the play company in London. So I don't have any doubts about the other claimants like the Earl of Oxford and well, for a long time, Francis Bacon was the favorite challenger, right? Do you recall your professor at Illinois weighing in on this issue?
Yes, he gave an answer that was similar to what you've said, in this idea of a committee or getting the input from others as they were putting plays together. But I think he would agree with exactly what you have said, and so. He was a remarkable genius, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think that's what you kind of have to throw up your hands and say that. I have colleagues who've written on the authorship issue, and one of them put it succinctly. I think this is Professor Braunmiller, recently retired, that most of the claims about authorship boil down to a kind of snobbery. That it becomes impossible for a certain mind to think that anybody who had grammar school education, although you need to look at what that syllabus was. It was formidable.
I think we have time for one more quick question. Ed, you had your hand raised there for a moment.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're on mute, Ed.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. Who is the target audience for these plays? For example, most people in England at the time were peasants. Very few people had an education, and you dissected the beginning of the play, and it had so many inner meanings. How could mostly the uneducated people understand what Shakespeare was saying, notwithstanding the definition of words at the time?
Well, that's a very good question. And again, another of my colleagues has done a lot of work on this. One of the motives for people to go to the stage in that era was because they knew they would learn new words. And I mean, not just words that existed, but brand new words. This is a time of pre-lexical, as they say, English. There's no dictionary, there's no rules, there's no grammar. Well, they're beginning to be grammar lessons and stipulations like that. But language is very fluid. Shakespeare needs a word, he will just make it up. And Johnson needs a word. They'll derive these, they'll invent words. It's enormously fertile linguistically. And so in some sense, everyone who goes to the theater is not prepared, is maybe not educated in the sense that they've never heard these words before. The other point to make is that despite a wildly runaway inflation rate, especially in the late Elizabethan, the 1590s, that decade was horrible economically. The price of admission to the Globe or any of the public theaters remained 1 penny. It remained 1 penny from the time they were built to the time they were torn down under Cromwell. There were indoor theaters which played to a more aristocratic audience, and those kinds of the plays that were written specifically for the indoor stages had a kind of more coterie appeal, I suppose, to the aristocratic, the court, if you will. But Shakespeare wrote all of his plays they're versatile. You can put them on in the public space. You can put them on in the court before the monarch, or you can, as Ben Jonson said, not without a certain amount of bitterness, you can put 4 barrels up and some wood planks down, and there's your stage. You can do it on the road, especially during plague.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think we have to draw this to a close.
Very good. Thank you for having me.
In your honor, we're going to give a donation in your name to the Westwood Village Library.
Excellent.
So much appreciated, and thank you very much for your time and effort.
Very good. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay,
I will send John in a moment. I'll copy the PowerPoint over to him.
Yeah, Stephen,
Yeah.
I'm jumping in ahead here, but that statement by W.H. Auden that if he had to burn all the Shakespeare plays but one, he would save Antony and Cleopatra. Where do you stand on that?
Well, how I stand on that is I think that's a weirdly melodramatic way to say that's my favorite play, right?
Yeah,
If we had to burn them all but one.
That's right. That's right. But what do you say? What's your favorite play?
Well, it changes, and there's never just one, but I'd say Macbeth, the Scottish play, excuse me.
Yeah, we read that in your class. That was great. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a miracle of language and psychology both. It's astounding. That's what I think. That's the one I'd burn last.
Next time you can come and talk about Macbeth. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Marcia, you want to close it out?
Yeah. Let's see now.
Take myself off mute. Well, thank you all so much for coming. And it was a thoroughly enjoyable, session here today with Professor Dickey. And we'll see you all next week then, okay? And be sure to go, I'll send out another flyer either this afternoon or tomorrow morning about the Concert for Peace on Saturday too. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, how to get out of these things.
We got a cheer for UCLA on Saturday.